With millions of different species living on Earth today, it is essential to have a consistent and reliable way of classifying them so that we can study, compare, and understand their relationships more clearly. In the past, our ancestors mostly categorized animals and plants based on their appearance or observable traits. For example, they might have considered black bears, brown bears, and polar bears as entirely separate types based purely on their color and habitat. However, this system was often inconsistent and confusing. People from different parts of the world gave different names to the same species, which led to lots of confusion, such as in the case of the grizzly bear, which is actually a type of brown bear, but was once considered separate. Another major issue with simple naming was that it did not tell us anything about how closely related different species were. For instance, although the names might make it seem like grizzly bears and koala bears are similar, they are not closely related at all from an evolutionary perspective. To solve these problems, during the 1700s, a scientist named Carl Linnaeus introduced a much more organized system of classification based on shared physical features and bone structures. This system, known as the Linnaean system, groups living organisms into a hierarchy of categories starting from the largest group and narrowing down to the smallest. At the top is the kingdom, such as the animal kingdom or the plant kingdom. From there it moves down through phylum, class, order, family, genus, and finally species. Because Linnaeus developed this system in a time when Latin was widely used in science, and because it was meant to be used globally, the classification names are mostly in Latin. For example, humans are classified as part of the kingdom Animalia, the phylum Chordata, the class Mammalia, the order Primates, the family Hominidae, the genus Homo, and the species Sapiens. Of course, it would be extremely impractical to say this full classification every time you refer to a human or any other species. Even the species name alone is often not unique enough, just like how many people share common names like Tom. So to provide clarity, Linnaeus proposed the binomial naming system, where each organism is identified by a two-part name made up of its genus and species. For humans, this would be Homo sapiens. The correct way to write this is in italics, with only the first letter of the genus name capitalized. This binomial system is still widely used today and provides a standardized way to name all organisms. However, as scientific tools like microscopes improved and we learn more about the internal biology and genetic structure of different species, newer models of classification were developed to reflect this deeper understanding. These new models did not replace the Linnaean system, but rather built on it and sometimes were merged with it. For instance, in the 1990s, another scientist also named Carl Woese, proposed an even broader system of classification known as the three-domain system. Based on detailed comparisons of ribosomal RNA sequences using new molecular techniques, Woese discovered that certain organisms that were once thought to be closely related were, in fact, much more different than expected. So he introduced three new categories called domains, which are placed above kingdoms in the hierarchy. These three domains are called Eukaryota, Bacteria, and Archaea. The domain Eukaryota includes all living organisms with eukaryotic cells, which have a nucleus and other complex structures inside, such as animals, plants, fungi, and protists. The second domain, Bacteria, includes all single-celled prokaryotic organisms that do not have a nucleus and are found in nearly every environment on Earth. The third domain, Archaea, includes other types of single-celled organisms that may look similar to bacteria but are genetically distinct and often live in extreme environments like hot springs, acidic lakes, and deep-sea hydrothermal vents. Archaea were originally thought to be just another type of bacteria, but are now understood to form their own unique group. Sometimes bacteria are referred to as true bacteria, while archaea are called primitive bacteria, even though both are ancient and fascinating in their own ways. Within each of these domains, the classification continues down into kingdoms and the same smaller levels as described in the Linnaean system. Another important concept to understand when studying biological relationships is the use of evolutionary trees. These diagrams help us visualize how different species or groups of species are related to each other over time by showing which ancestors they share in common. For example, if you look at an evolutionary tree that includes birds, Tyrannosaurus rex, and bats, you might be surprised to see that birds are actually more closely related to Tyrannosaurus rex than to bats. This is because birds and T-Rex share a more recent common ancestor than birds and bats do. In the same way, bats and birds are more closely related to each other than either is to spiders, because their common ancestor with spiders lies much further back in evolutionary history. Even though different evolutionary trees might look different in design or layout, they all carry the same kind of information. The key idea is that whenever you see a line split into two, it represents a point in history when one species evolved into two new ones, each following its own path from that point onward. To build these trees and determine evolutionary relationships, scientists compare the structures and DNA of living organisms as well as fossil records from species that lived in the past. Finally, remembering the classification order, domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species can be tricky, but using a mnemonic can make it much easier. For example, the phrase "Dear King Philip came over for great spaghetti" uses the first letter of each classification level to help you remember the correct order. You can even modify the phrase to suit your memory better, as long as it helps you recall the terms in the right sequence.